basically support from Myanmar business community and with support from our stakeholders, regulators, and again with support of our funding partners, the governments of UK and Australia. Sorry, can you mute? I think somebody's not muted. We've been working with MID for the last few years, right? MID is now actually, established its branding. It has quite strong, internal governance structure, which you know, and many of you actually helped to improve MID's branding, help to strengthen MID's governance, and help to improve the training delivery of MID, right? I think because we have trainers and many of you are already involved in delivering trainings, or you hopefully will be working to deliver trainings, MID training in future. Again, IFC provides help to MID in that regard, right? We help to develop materials and hopefully we'll work on that in future. We plan to work with MID on some, bigger initiatives, like we plan hopefully to work on the next version, next publication of Myanmar Corporate Governance Scorecard in future. Hopefully in 1 year from now, we work together with MID on some regulatory initiatives. You may not know, but Thierry is now formally a member of Myanmar Corporate Governance Reform Committee. She'll be there and she'll be able to contribute, right? Just to provide the feedback from business community to regulators and our development agencies there. So that's quite good, quite important. And also, like the role of MID is to raise awareness, right, among the companies to help to improve the professionalism of board members and our corporate governance professionals. And again, to do that, we try to deliver trainings on various topics which are of interest to the audience in Myanmar. We deliver a lot of trainings so far, right? We have, I think, strong program offering, and we plan to do it in future. And in order for this offering to be strong, right, and relevant, we decided before the end of the current phase to do a few more training activities. And you attended one on Disclosure Toolkit. I hope you liked it a couple of weeks ago. And today we'll work on the, again, adult learning part of, again, of capacity building for Myanmar trainers. And also we'll share a bit more about disclosure and transparency. I think it's still important, especially in the context of what's going now, right? You may have heard, SCCM is probably looking at the new templates for annual reporting and our disclosure requirements. Yangon Stock Exchange is planning to update its requirements on corporate governance reporting. There are various initiatives which are currently happening. There's a project by EY, I think, who actually, we are looking at ESG reporting specifically, environmental sustainability reporting, and then you have other very important initiatives, right, like Wiki Quintessar, right, which again focuses on a lot on sustainability reporting and disclosure of non-financial data by companies. So that's again that's a bit of a context here, right? I think again the session will be quite interactive. Feel free to ask all your questions. We have very knowledgeable trainers. Again, I want to thank all of them. I know we have people in various time zones, right? We have Anne Molyneux, who actually has been in Myanmar. Some of you may have met her, right? In Myanmar, right, on multiple occasions. She's in Australia. Ralitza, one of the main drivers behind IFC's Disclosure and Transparency Toolkit. She now sits in Europe. She's 7 a.m. for her. Mary Jo, I think it's late night. Thanks again for staying up late. And Eric, it's 6 a.m. for you, right? Thank you for your commitment. I think you're always in the hardest, you have the hardest time slot. Eric is again one of the most knowledgeable people, I think, on governance and disclosure. And also he hasn't been in Myanmar, but he has been in many other countries in the region. I met him in the Philippines, and he knows the regional practices very well. Again, just you know the trainers, but and participants from MID. Just Thierry, who is also CEO of MID, she's here. I think some of you who may not know her, I think you can see her on the screen. I'll stop here, sorry. And Mary Jo and Relisa, please feel free to take over.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much, Anar. And I also wanted to introduce Professor Bistra Boeva, if you can wave. I don't know if you can see her. I can see her at the bottom of the screen. Bistra? Hello. So if you would, I cannot hear you, but
Yes. Now, do you hear me now?
yes, I do. I do.
And I
Thank you
hope
so
you
much.
see me.
And yes, I can see you. All right. Hi, Anne. Nice to see you. Okay, well, welcome everyone. And I'd really like to set the tone for this particular event and just say that we are definitely on a learning curve together. So we'll do our best to share our experiences with the training materials and the adult learning. From our understanding, we haven't heard any voices yet. So I wonder if everyone could just introduce yourself and say hello. And I wonder if you could just say your name and position and any experience, just 3 sentences, just so that we can hear your voices. I can see the contact list, the list of participants. If you don't mind, anyone, just say, if we could hear your voice and have you say hello.
Yeah. Shall I moderate that? And I'll just use the sequence that I see on screen from our side, as in from the MIOD trainer base and supporter base. Vicky, you are the first one that I see, so I'm going to invite you to say a few words. You are muted though.
It's Vicky Bowman. I'm sitting in Kalor. So I'm the director of Myanmar Centre for Responsible Business. I'm on the board of MIOD and the chair of the Learning Committee. And obviously we're working on responsible business now for 7-8 years, and in partnership for the last 3 years with Nikola Dolage and Yiva on our annual report on transparency in Myanmar companies, where we do this benchmarking based largely on ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard. And the new report is out on Monday. So we encourage you all to read that. And Nicola might want to say a bit more about that too.
Okay, so thank you very much, Vicky. And I hear the depth of your experience. Just because of the challenge that we have with timing, the real request for all of us is just do this in 3 sentences. So I'll model that. My name is Mary Jo Larson. I have worked with the IFC for close to 14 years on corporate governance, and I'm very involved in the Disclosure and Transparency platform. And I'm delighted to be with you this evening. It's midnight where I am. So Anne, would you model that with 3 sentences?
I'm Anne Molyneux. I come from about 25 years of corporate governance background, largely from a financial reporting background, but I've been working on ESG activities and the disclosure toolkit with the IFC and many other projects. And I look forward to seeing you all on screen, Myanmar.
Thank you. Okay, if you don't mind, if you would please continue moderating.
Great. So the next person I see happens to be Nikola Dolage. So I will invite Nikola, please, to say the 3 sentences.
Okay, so first I have to apologize because you will see the background, which is quite scary. So my name is Nikola. I have the pleasure to work indeed with Vicky on the Princesa report. I am running a small company which name is Yiva, and we do support the transformation of Myanmar companies on governance and disclosure. And I used to be a non-financial auditor for EY on ESG topics since 2008.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Next up on my screen is Miss Jasmine Bazin. You are muted.
Hi, good afternoon from here. So my name is Jasmine, and I think Diri and I has actually joined the MIOD batches way back in a few years back in Bangkok, and we also do a lot of the exam. We also did the exams, and I think we are quite a few of the certified trainer here together with I think Vicky. And of course, with the kind sponsorship from the IFC, we have attended this the lesson. I'm currently working with the EA Bank, heading as a managing director for corporate banking. I look after the corporate banking, financial institution practice, and the transaction banking.
Thank you very much. Next up that I see is Matuzawin, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tuza. So I'm the part of the corporate governance journey since 2015 when IFC selected and invited some private sectors to involve in the corporate governance initiative Myanmar. So currently I'm working with TV and taking some courses to facilitate for the corporate governance. So as for my business, I'm the director of the Eiffel Power Engineering Company, which is like an EPC company. So nice to see you all here, and I look forward to learn some better techniques so that I can facilitate better with the MIOD courses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, could I please invite Ms. Sandra Win to say a few words, please? The 3 sentences.
Thank you.
Sandra, are you there? Hello.
Hi, sorry, I thought I heard Sandra Win, so that's why. Hello.
I meant to say Sandra Min, but I was reading and it actually, I need the glasses, obviously.
Don't worry about it. So hi, everyone, I'm Sandra, and I've been in financial industry for about 15 years, and I'm back in Myanmar. Initially in the States, and used to work for Wells Fargo as well as US Bank, and I sit on a number of boards in Myanmar, including MIOD. Currently, and I'm also running the agriculture and food venture, along with the energy companies in Myanmar as well. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you very much. Next, may I invite Mercy Siton, please, Amaye.
Hi. Okay. Hi, I'm Sisi. I'm from KPMG Myanmar. I've been with KPMG Myanmar for about 6 years now. So, I mean, you know, my experience, of course, you know, with the firm, we do provide a lot of training and a lot of coaching. So, yeah, I mean, you know, my background, I'm a CPA, you know, a professional auditor as well as an accountant, and, you know, work as an advisor, emphasize in a business advisory in Myanmar. So thank you to meeting you all, and I hope I can contribute more and more to MIOD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we would really, really appreciate that. Next, Ms. Sunana, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sunanda, and I'm currently in the role of Head of Internal Audit at Apollo Towers, which is, I believe, the second largest telecommunication towers company in Myanmar. And before that, I have about 15 years of financial audit experience, mainly in state and local governments in the United States. So that would be my background, and I'm glad to meet everybody here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And could Tentu Kind, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tentu Kind. I run my own business for like 20 years in the IT business. So I'm glad to see you all here, and then would like to learn a lot from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mamuya Lambek, please.
Hello. My name is Muya Lambek. My background is in banking, and right now I'm the consultant for banking and payment sector in IFC and World Bank. And I'm also a board member of the MIOD, and I've been helping MIOD with some trainings. So looking forward to train more and learn more. Nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, could we have Mathoda from Ellen Gladhill, please?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from
We can't hear you very well မရေနည်းနည်းလေးကျယ်ပေးလို့ရမလား
Okay. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Tola Singh from Ellen Gladhill, Myanmar. For me, it's the first time to join the training. And I hope I can learn a lot from here. Now I'm joining as an observer to participate for upcoming training of the MLOD as a trainer. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thank you.
And yes, and we're delighted to welcome Ellen Gladhill, who will be a new contributor to our sort of the legal panel that help us. Next is Utun Jojo, please. Utun Jojo. Okay, I'm going to move on to Krista Avery, please.
Thank you, Thierry. I hope you can hear me now. Sorry about before. I am a member of the MIOD and a former company secretary. I have a master's in ESG from Australia in 2012, and I am a graduate of the AICD CDC with Order of Merit. But I have been a practitioner of ESG for some time here. I currently sit on 2 international boards and also perform resident director services for new projects in Myanmar. And I'm just keen to see the spreading of corporate governance training and to be involved in that on all kinds of levels. So thank you for including me.
Thank you, Krista, for all your support. Go Mike Pomian, please. Go Mike, Javala. Okay, while we wait for Go Mike, I will move on to Makim Myomienso, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Kim Yum-so from Directorate of Investment and Company Administration. I work for Myanmar Online Communities as a document examiner. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Dr. Myomienso, and thank you for the DICA for all of your support as well. We have Kotorakoko, please.
Hello, hi, good morning. This is Tura. I am currently a senior advisor to global private equity funds who have invested in Myanmar. One of our current portfolio is Apollo Towers, and I seem to see my head of internal audit on MIOD calls more than in the office, so I think that's a good sign. In my previous life, I used to work for investment banks and take companies public, so was involved in making sure disclosure was sufficient and adequate. And we do the same with our existing businesses now as we prepare them for lenders, investors, and potentially the capital markets. And it's an improving but real challenge in Myanmar. So pleased to meet you all.
Thank you very much, Kotura. And we have a message from Sia Utun Jojo from DICA that the microphone is not working. So no worries. I hope you can follow along. Next up is Matnang Iimum, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Nang. I have attended MIOD training before last year, twice as an observer. I don't have a background in audit or anything, but then I'm managing my own business, and I believe that corporate governance is very important, even a smaller startup like us. And also for me, I come from a sales and training background. I have over 10 years of trainings, and also currently working as a corporate trainer in Myanmar. Anything you need from me, I'm very happy to learn and also contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matnang. Mawawa, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mowa, and I'm a Central Executive Committee member at Myanmar Women Entrepreneurs Associations and ran an HR company as well. And IFC support us to attend TCP program in 2016. Then I joined MIOD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mawawa. Thank you also for all your support. Go Ricky U, please.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm I'm on the road currently. So currently I'm with AR Bank. My colleague Madazin just introduced. So I'm working with her at the moment in corporate banking. And my background is I'm a qualified accountant where I've been working at different banks in both Myanmar and Australia before. I've been with MIOD family since the, I think the batch 1 of director training, so it's been a while. So great to meet you all and looking forward to the remaining session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe on, would either any of the IFC participants like Malulu and Eric, I don't think we've heard from you. Would you like to introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, sure. My name is Erik Vermeulen. I'm a professor of business and financial law at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, where it's currently still early morning. I'm also working for 25 years at a company called Signify, which is Philips Lighting, where I do governance stuff as well. And I work on this project with Ralitza and the other members of the team already for like many years. So I think we are kind of experts in the field of disclosure and transparency of ESG. And I look forward to this meeting, obviously.
Great. Thank you very much. Malulu, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lulu from IFC. I'm with the IFC for like 3-4 years and with the Myanmar Corporate Governance Initiative Program for Myanmar. Nice to meeting you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I wonder, Bistra, Professor Boeva, could you introduce yourself? I think your microphone is muted.
No, do you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's about 8 o'clock in Bulgaria AM. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join this very interesting meeting. And congratulations again for your webinar now. A few words about me. At present, I'm a university professor and I'm teaching corporate governance at master level for Bulgarian and foreign students. And also I'm working with Ralitza also and of course Marie-Jo on ESG issues for many years. And also Ralitza was very helpful when I decided to write a book on sustainable corporate governance, and I published this book in English. And also Marie-Jo was also very helpful with comments on this book. Also a few words about my experience. I'm an ex-commissioner in Bulgarian Securities and Stock Exchange Commission. Later on, I was chairing a privatization fund, or it's a kind of investment fund. And also I'm a member of some board of Bulgarian companies. And of course, I'm, let's say, a promoter of sustainable corporate governance in our region and in some other countries. Our region, I mean, Balkans, ECA countries. Thank you very much for inviting me and good luck with this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. If I may, before I hand off, maybe just a quick introduction. A lot of people know me, especially from the MIOD side, but I'm the CEO of MIOD. It's my pleasure to have this position since July of this year. It's, I think, an institute that is absolutely essential for our country to have sustainable growth and strong organizations. So delighted to support. Like many others here, I had been involved in this journey since 2015 when the IFC invited us to participate as business community members. My other half, because I do this part-time, although it feels more like a full-time job, but the other half of me is an investor, an investment promoter. I have an investment banking background, and I do see that having good corporate governance facilitates investment. So I'm a firm believer. Another thing that I am a firm believer of is this Train the Trainer session, which I had the pleasure of attending, actually the long form of in Thailand 3 years ago, I believe, and that was amazing. Matuza was there as well, and because it was a 2-day session, we did quite a lot. Just like now, we took a material and we talked about how we should deliver it, especially how adults absorb information versus how younger people would. Obviously this is a condensed session, but yes. I hope that we will still get tools and techniques that will improve all of us as trainers. Very few of us are professional trainers. Only Nang, I think, is a professional trainer, so we very much benefit from this. So thank you for facilitating this to the IFC, and thank you for all the facilitators and people who will be teaching us how to do this. Over to you.
I just want to thank you actually for facilitating the way you did, because I'd like to demystify the whole training of trainers discussion, if you don't mind. I mean, basically, we're talking about authentic communication, and we're talking about trying to make this easier for all of us. So the main takeaway that from my experience as we opened this session, as you noticed, and I'm trying to be transparent with you. So for me, I'm getting better with this technology, but the way you stepped in and everyone on the team stepped in to help. So we're all working together to learn, but I especially want to thank you for the way you introduced everyone. And I want to thank everyone else for the brief introductions, because one of the major challenges that we all know as facilitators, educators, or trainers is one thing is finite, and that's time. So when we ask someone to please be brief, we call it an elevator speech. All of us should have an elevator introduction, but thank you so much for the way you opened this and welcomed everyone. So you set the tone, and this is really an event that will reflect the culture that you've established. So that's very obvious to me as I'm sitting here far away. By the way, we have a snowstorm here, so I am in a context where I'm listening to the wind, and it's snowing heavily as we speak. So, all right, let me continue. And so since you can actually see my screen, this will be even more transparent than I planned initially. So, but that's okay. So what you're going to notice that I will do, because I'm conscious of time, is I am going to move down to the goals of this event. And so, most of you, anyone who's been involved in any type of education programs or training programs, is accustomed to knowledge, skills, and attitudes. KSA, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The goals are very high level. When we're really talking about events that are interactive and face-to-face like workshops, we actually don't use goals and objectives in exactly the same way that they are used when programs are developed. So for us, the goals are, overarching, and they're sometimes aspirational, but you see actually knowledge, skills, and attitudes as you look at this list. So when you put together a program, it's easy for you to put together goals if you think of these 3 categories. So improving understandings, in this case, of the strategic value and demand for transparent corporate reporting and disclosure practice. So that's one goal, easy for you to remember. The second goal, really generally for us, as at least the way IFC is conducting the training, is not to have you just understand and then passively think about what you understood, but to some extent apply what you just learned in whatever context. I was listening to the backgrounds of the participants, which are so impressive. What a strong group of people we have in front of us. So what you know already is a little bit more about the depth of expertise in the room. You've heard voices. And the second point that we want to make is in this 2 hours, you really won't have extensive opportunities to practice the skills, design and facilitate, but listen to the backgrounds you just heard. You can easily reach out to your colleagues and the people in this network and try to develop opportunities to, for now, probably conduct online events or work with your teammates in your organization, but hopefully move beyond this to workshops where you work together. But the second aspect, of course, is skills. And the third really is connected, because sharing and further developing resources and supporting capacity building networks, when you come together in these groups, it's really an opportunity to learn from each other. So again, the difference between this 2 hours and a typical 3-hour event will be dramatic, but we'll try to really highlight some important points as we move forward to make this as useful as possible for you. So one of the main points I'd like to make is actually probably the most important technique and skill that you can develop is your questioning. Okay, so when you think, well, we're going to conduct an event, what is the main point? What is the main takeaway that we want as a result of this event? And so I would say for this 2 hours, the main question in my mind is, how do we engage diverse senior leaders? You just listen to the variety of backgrounds. And the question is, what do you control and how do you facilitate? So you just saw a beautiful example of facilitation in the introductions, and we'll try to demonstrate some other examples of facilitation as we move forward. But I will be really honest, the challenge for us with online learning is finding stronger ways to communicate. But the takeaway that I hope you keep in mind is, let's pay attention to the questions. Pay attention to the questions that are used in the agenda. You'll notice there are questions that begin just about every session, and also pay attention to the questions that we ask you and each other, okay? So, all right, so now it is now, I would say we are into the 0 hour, and I am going to move immediately into experiential adult learning. And then we will have a very nice panel discussion to try to demonstrate a level of interaction that, that the facilitators can actually practice with you. But what we're trying to do is find ways to make the online learning a little more conversational. Then we'll come back to analyze the experiential design and techniques. Then we'll have Eric address changes in reporting on corporate governance. And excuse me, that's Anne. That will be on corporate governance. Then we have Eric on company leadership on crisis response. And Relitza, of course, will be moderating from the beginning in the panel. And then she'll share with you some of the new resources that IFC is developing, including some very exciting platform resources. What I find so important about momentum and the ability to move forward has to do with being much more explicit about the principles that we all share together. So as many of you are familiar with these principles, they're corporate governance principles. There are 4 pillars that we anchor, we anchor our presentations and the way we interact according to these principles, but they're also related. They're not just related to corporate governance, they're related to disclosure and transparency, and they're related to our interactions together. So one is responsibility, and right now I have a responsibility to manage our time together, but also to be sure to make some very clear points as succinctly as I possibly can. I'm accountable to my team, because if I take up too much time, they won't have the opportunity to really express the main points that they have prepared for you. In fairness, I will keep that in mind. So I'm just sharing with you how I actually apply this within my own work. And there's a certain transparency. There's more transparency actually in this presentation than I had actually planned, because you can see my screen. So you can literally watch me skip over certain topics. So Bistra, I had asked you if you would just tell a little story, if you're there, about transparency, how it, because I've related these principles to the work that we're going to do together. But I thought when we were talking about transparency that you made an interesting point just from your own work as a commissioner. So if you would just share just your perspective on transparency.
Thank you very much for inviting me to share my experience, because for me this webinar is about sharing experience and lessons we learn. You know, many years ago, I was a commissioner at our Bulgarian Securities and Stock Exchange Commission. And I had a meeting with a foreign investor, representative of big investment fund from Western Europe. And I tried to inform him about our excellent legislation in terms of capital market and corporate governance as well. You know, it was a time when we are starting to develop our new economy and our capital market many years ago, moving from socialist economy to market economy. My partner was very, very cooperative listener. But at the end of my presentation, he asked me only one question: how a foreign investor could be informed about the strategic priorities of the company? How could a foreign investor could get a clear picture how the board members contribute to the financial performance of the company? You know, for me, it was a kind of surprise, but I understood very quickly that transparency is not only about good legislation.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, Mary, but it is about how a board makes the company visible to the market and today, very important, to the community. And one thing I learned from this meeting and later on, that transparency is about the integrity of the board members. And if you don't mind, I would like to point out the takeaway or lessons learned from this small story. Transparency is about openness and good communication. The successful board members, the leaders, for me, have to deliver the results of the company in a good and well understandable way to the market and to the community. And as we say in Bulgarian, plain Bulgarian, and as you say in English, plain English. So, so that's very important, because if you don't mind a second, you have to know that your audience are not only the sophisticated investors and financial analysts. We have to please the shareholders, including the women. I'll stop here. That's very important. Who are the readers of our information? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bistra. That's a beautiful story, I think, in description. One of the main points that I wanted to emphasize would be the role of the facilitators as a form of leaders, because there's an attitude that's required in order for leadership to value the type of transparency that you were talking about, because it really has to do with a willingness to be much more open and a certain respect for the investors and the community members in terms of the credibility of the information that's provided. So this is a stronger emphasis on the culture and leadership of the company than on the compliance and regulation requirements. So I really appreciate the story that you gave. So let's move into the experiential adult learning session. And the same question is one that I will refer to and that anchors the work that I'm doing. I'd like to, at this stage, really describe the features and benefits of something called experiential adult learning. So what we can see already just from listening to the backgrounds of the participants that are online, we know there's a tremendous amount of expertise in the room. And we know that actually others are more expert in their specific professional topics than each one of us would be, not be able to answer the types of questions that they would be able to answer. So the person who's facilitating to the greatest extent possible is trying to introduce major concepts and then find experiences or draw experiences from the group. So let's before we get started though, make sure that we're all on the same page, because as you know, some people have much deeper expertise in disclosure and transparency than others. So I'd like you to look at a very brief activity, and just this will be a situation where I hope you can read. Can everyone read the warm-up activity?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have the word transparency there, and Bistra just finished giving a brief, sharing an experience of hers with transparency from the perspective of someone in a nation that was going through a tremendous transformation itself. So looking at the three options for transparency, is the definition of transparency obvious to you? Can you type the answer to that question so that I can see? Let me just see if chat is a way that I can communicate with you. So when you see the word transparency,
should we just send it to you so that we don't tell everyone?
It's just type it in. Just can you write? Is it easy? You can, just for the sake of, how should we do this, by the way? Okay, very good. I can see people typing. Good. Okay, that's great. Okay, there we go. So thank you. That's helpful for me as feedback. So transparency, everyone has the correct answer. Congratulations. It's that openness within and outside an organization, and the extent to which behaviors and practices are observable, willingness to engage openly, which helps to build trust and confidence in an organization's culture. So this is an essential definition. The other terms that we're using, I just wanted to be sure that we're on the same page. You can see culture and the answer to that very quickly. There we go. We have the answer, a shared set of values, assumptions, and traditions about acceptable or unacceptable conduct. And here's where leadership comes in. And actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to become comfortable with the fact that as a facilitator, there's something called facilitative leadership, which is you really have a strong influence on the group. So the way you practice some of these principles in your dynamics, in your learning community makes a difference. Of course, you're establishing a culture. And I can see that already at your institute. I can sense it immediately. And finally, there's that word disclosure. And actually, I did not find simple definitions for disclosure. The one you see there, of course, is the remaining option. The duty to report material information related to regulatory compliance, investment decisions, and sustainability risks. Is there anyone that has a problem with that definition? Any of the trainers? If not, we can move on. I just want to be sure we're all on the same page. And let's go back to, so in terms of techniques, what I'm trying to do dealing with a multi-level group, which means I know that there are people in this group that have a high level of expertise, but I also realize that there are, and this is healthy, we're trying to build a community and of understanding around disclosure and transparency. I also know that I need to move forward and then step back and bring people along, not make assumptions about the terms that we're using. So this is called Experiential Adult Learning. And can you actually see my cursor? Can you see that?
Yes.
That's great. Okay. So when we first started, we introduced an abstract concept. And if you think about it, most of the materials that you are reading, there are all these terms that if you don't understand the significance, you need stories. And so a definition is helpful, but with experiential adult learning, what we want to emphasize is definitely you will have people in your workshops who are analysts, and they are researchers, they're analysts. They have a depth of knowledge that comes from their understanding of theories of different, not just theories, but serious analysis of the emerging practices. However, the ways to really bring people along in terms of behavior change really require much more of an emphasis on relevant experiences. So in your training, the emphasis is please always fairly early begin with not only introductions so that you break the ice, but also any stories, any photos, any images. You saw images of people with my question, but also scenarios. So in terms of relevant experiences, I'm going to turn to Bistra again. Bistra, would you share another story with us? And this one really to help us understand why it's so important that we're addressing this whole issue of ESG disclosure and transparency.
Thank you very much. I appreciate first of all, your question and your points how to deliver all these messages to the people you're trained. Thank you very much. You see, there is another quite new experience. You know, I'm working with Ralica on ESG issues as well. I'm a member of Bulgarian National Corporate Governance Commission. We are so-called the guardian of our national code. And a year ago, I tried to read the annual report of one of the blue chips on our capital market. And also I would like to point that the CEO of the company and the chair of the board is a prominent Bulgarian businessman, and I would like to mention a leader. And I read the report. Of course, it was a good and informative report, and I tried to comply with some of the guidelines of European Commission how to disclose ESG information. Of course, I found in this report excellent information about, of course, the economic results, about social initiatives. Of course, I read pages. It was more than 50 pages, can you imagine? And unfortunately, at the end, I did not get understanding about the strategic priorities of the companies in their future years. Also, I could not get clear information about the board members, about how do they comply with their duties in order to deliver this ESG information and to promote sustainable corporate governance code. And of course, I try to put myself in the shoes of the shareholders or should-be investors. Unfortunately, the information which I tried to extract from this report, it was not sufficient, and I would like to point out, relevant for the investors or the shareholders to decide to invest or disinvest or to put more money in this basket. You know, again, I would like to share with you my understanding and lessons learned. Transparency is about clear and understandable presentation. What is behind the walls of the company? What is behind the walls? What could they see as investors and shareholders? And as I said in my previous comments, again, it is about how does the company, and I would like to point out, no people who are engaged in the preparation of the report, not the people who are investor relations officer, but board members. How do they communicate with the market and the communities? Because, as it was mentioned a few times here, it is about trust. I would say that when you are trying to be transparent, you would like people to trust you. And finally, of course, transparency is the other side of the disclosure. So to make the story short, it's not about the pages, but it was about the content, and content tailored to the market, to the community, and to attracting the investors. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent story. And of course, I hear the phrase so often, it's not more reporting, it's better reporting. So how do you actually tailor your report? People can work so hard, that's not the issue. It's really what do they include in the report. So that is an example of a relevant experience. So in fact, this is a dynamic that we pay attention to as when you are facilitating, educating, training. Keep in mind, you understand, and there are many analysts who will understand the concepts, but to bring it to life, make sure that you are going back and forth, up and down. So continuously adding examples and then making always in every presentation, should be some thought-provoking analysis, some tool, some means that the participants have of moving forward with the confidence that they are using well-anchored information. So this is one dynamic that we keep in mind. The other is the dynamic that we are experiencing right now as I work with Zoom. So it's the whole question of how active or passive your participants are, but of course it applies to the board. So there's the dynamic of and it's very natural in the beginning of observing and analyzing. This is a classic dynamic with universities. You know, you have, if you're lucky, you have good stories, but you definitely analyze, and then you get information, and you have your exams and your tests on your information. Our challenge really with adult learners, especially individuals who are in leadership roles, is how to share information, motivating those participants, but sharing practical, really credible tools that we have developed and have tested internationally, making sure that they understand there is solid research behind the information that we were giving, and then how do we make sure that they apply it. So this is where we are going. I mean, this is not the type of program where you are just like watching television, for example. So you can see there is a tension going up and down over being concrete or abstract, and there is the same dynamic here. But certainly people have to observe and be analytic, but for those of you who are deep analysts, you really want to find ways to engage participants in some types of activities. So moving into the experiential adult learning is a cycle. It's a continuous learning cycle. And that's the emphasis is on experiential. That's what we're talking about. And so it's easy to remember this because it's 4 quadrants. It is so solid. This can be used for any speech, but it's tremendously helpful as you plan any type of event. So when you start your event, here you are, you begin with motivation, and motivate people by engaging them, by sharing stories, by giving them some sense of community together. And, stories, images, insights, news, scenarios. What are the key questions? I'm going back to the emphasis on questions, not only to help you organize what you're doing, but also thinking very clearly about what information other people need naturally. So who are we and why are we here? So that's what I hope we've accomplished by going through the goals, introducing ourselves, and then through this brief introduction through the excellent stories that Bistra shared with us. What we're going to do now is move into more of it'll include motivation. You don't just leave that, but you're going back and forth, but there will probably be more information in the next session because it's a panel discussion. But if you watch, the question that's being asked is why? And then the panel members are going to share succinctly some of their perspectives on why this is so important, why, and what we're talking about, what is important. You'll hear the question, listen to the question that Relitza asks as she begins the panel. I just have 2 slides that I want to share that relate to transparency before I pass this over to Relitza. So this is a simple example. By the way, there's some beautiful materials that Anne Molyneux has put together on corporate governance and as it relates to disclosure and transparency. And what's interesting is the one company that she pointed out, this is Turk Telecom. This was an example for shareholding transparency in 2019. And I was doing some research, looking at Anne's materials and thinking a little bit about this, trying to imagine how can I make this more visible? And then I look what happened in 2020. Look at the difference in the ways that this company is disclosing the ownership. Whoops, sorry. All right. There it is. Can you see that? So transparency it relates not only to attitudes and the way you're communicating, but also much more like explicit efforts to communicate information more clearly. Anyway, so I thought that was fascinating as a great example of becoming much clearer and more transparent. Ultimately, we're getting into experiential learning and we'll go into that session next. But for now, I will stop my share and pass this over to Relitza for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Mary Jo, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And as Mary Jo said, we used to deliver this type of trainings in 3 days for the past 15 years around the world, where we had the opportunity to engage with the trainers, that they select a topic, which they present in the end with the co-presenters, and we can provide feedback and have a real experience. Now, everything has to be succinct and find a way to use some of these techniques in a more confined and restricted virtual environment to take advantages of the technologies as well. So what we usually do in beginning of trainings, we organize an interview with experts, and you can also leverage some of the experts in the room in order to motivate the audience. So today I have a panel of recognized international experts for you, which will share their their views on the business case for sustainability disclosure. And you will learn how you can use similar techniques in your own trainings. So for decades, reliable, comparable, consistent financial information has given investors the confidence to buy stocks and bonds. Investors today need similar information about the sustainability of companies so they can direct the trillion of dollars to create wealth and jobs and build back the economy. So my question to the panel today is, why is transparency and disclosure of environmental, social, and governance issues important in times of crisis when everyone is focused on financial survival? And we are starting with Anne Molyneux, who is not only a lead public and private sector expert on corporate governance practices and worked in all regions on development also, but also a vice chair of the International Corporate Governance Network, the Global Investors Network. I will share with you quickly some of the slides that we have prepared for you. Okay. So, Anne?
Yes, thank you, Raleigh. Raleigh has touched on my perspective on corporate reporting. I've been a CFO developing corporate reports. I've been a pension fund trustee using corporate reports, but more recently, my experience has been as the vice chair of the global investor community, the really global big investors. Now, they are the people who have the money to invest, and increasingly they have been demanding greater ESG reporting. So why? Well, in actual fact, those three words, responsibility, risk, and reward, are very high on their agenda. They are very much aware that they have a responsibility for the funds they have, because very often those funds are not their funds, they're your funds. They might be from your pension plan for your retirement. And so they realize that they have a responsibility to invest wisely and well for the asset owners. You can't just throw the money in the door. So you actually have to make a considered, as a steward of that money, you have to actually make a considered decision as to where and how much to invest. Now, part of our role, therefore, as an investor, is to ensure that we really do deep fiduciary duties, really deep due diligence on the companies in which we invest. So as a consequence, those companies that tell us most are likely to be more likely to be, if they're well performing, we're more likely to be on our investment list. But if we don't hear from you, or we don't have complete information, or we have to go to researchers to get information, we won't get company information, we will get other information. Now, it might be accurate, it might not be accurate, but we need an accurate picture before we invest. So in this responsibility, we really need full, detailed, complete information. Now, when we say full, detailed, complete information, I'm with Mary Jo. We don't want just more pages. We want better information. A diagram, for example, will tell 1,000 words, will tell a very different and very clear picture. So it's our responsibility to do our due diligence, to investigate the companies. And for example, BlackRock, it's an asset manager. It doesn't own those funds. It's the biggest asset manager in the world, but it doesn't own the assets, and it has to invest on behalf of others. The others are sometimes companies and sometimes institutions and sometimes individuals, but it's largely pension funds. So they must do their homework. And more recently, they and many other such investors have been saying, it's not just about the financials. For many years, we've had financial information. We've made decisions just on financial information. But more recently, it has been about the risks that rise from not just financial information, but from non-financial information, ESG information, information about company sustainability. Now, when we say this, we talk about it as a risk perspective. We want to know what is the strategies of the company and what are the risks that you won't achieve those strategies. Now, in the end, if you take, for example, climate change, if you are addressing climate change, you are addressing climate risk. And it should prepare you for accessing the opportunities, say, of wind farming, coming out of the environment, but it also should prepare you to manage climate change risk. If you're by the sea, if you're, as we are having just right now in Australia, we're having many of our coastal areas are being bombarded by very high seas, and we're losing beaches and tourist resorts as a consequence. In the end, all of these have a financial impact. Now, remember, those who are investors need to get a return on their investment. And so we need to be able to plan our investments so that we get a return for you people, or whoever our investees are, our asset owners are, so that you can actually get your rewards, your just rewards, your dividends, if you like. So then we look, as investors, we look very carefully at how ESG companies perform. And in general, as data comes to grow, and for many years there wasn't much data available on ESG activities and their impact on a company, we are now seeing that those companies that have better ESG governance generally actually generate better, more consistent, sustainable rewards. So we look at ESG disclosures. We want to see that they're all there from a responsibility perspective, for us to fill our responsibilities, from a risk perspective, and also from a reward perspective. In the end, we have to earn fund returns. Riley, back to you.
Thank you very much, Anne. You put your finger on something very, very important. When we started on our journey of developing the Disclosure and Transparency Toolkit, because as part of the IFC corporate governance methodology for assessing investment, disclosure and transparency is one of the parameters. And until a few years ago, we only used to look into the financials and the financial report. And that was not enough. So we expanded this to the environmental, social, and governance information. And for us as an investor, we're pretty good with assessing corporate governance. We understand key performance indicators, but the idea of linking risks and finding opportunities and the strategic objectives of the company was really the most challenging and eye-opening one in terms of the development. And with that, I want to move to Eric to share his views on why ESG and transparency is important. And please feel free to share any questions via the chat for the speakers in the panel discussion. Eric, up to you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. To me, ESG is not about reporting anymore. It's much more than that. It has become a strategy, and you have to be transparent about it in order to have a dialogue with all your stakeholders, including the investors, but definitely also the consumers and other people. And let me explain this slide to you. On the left-hand side, you see how a corporation was managed. It was a hierarchical structure, and you had leaders at the top, the executives. And here you see one person. Let's assume that's a CEO. And I think in the 90s, into 2000s, it was pretty clear for the leaders where their companies were going to. It was the industries were set. You knew who your competitors were. Innovation was important, but it was more like revolutionary. You created like an improved product. So I work at an electronics company, and that's what we did. For instance, in lighting, we were the #1, and it was clear to them where the company was going in the next 5 to 10 years. Then you see the red line. That's the new digital reality. All of a sudden, we see digital transformation becoming more important, and we see a lot of emerging technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, big data, sensors, the Internet of Things, accelerating and amplifying each other. That's the red line. So we see an exponential growth of technology. And it started like in the 2010s. All of a sudden, it became less clear for the leaders where the companies were going. New competitors were emerging. Consumer behavior was changing. Now we are in 2020, and we all know the pandemic accelerated everything. So if you ask a leader these days, where do you think your company will be in the next 5 years? They just don't know. They cannot know. Nobody knows. So in order to make sure that your company remains relevant and grows, you have to transform your structure as well. It's not only about coming up with new products or having new services, but you have to create an ecosystem. And that's what you see here. And that's where the arrow, you have to transform yourself from this hierarchical structure to a flatter structure that is closer to your stakeholders. So you have to be closer to your investors. You have to be closer to your consumers. And in order to do that, you have to create trust, an ecosystem of trust. And you can only have an ecosystem of trust if you are transparent and brutally honest. You cannot hide anything anymore. Now, part of your product, part of what you sell, part of your DNA is ESG, the environment, social, and governance. And you have to have a dialogue with your stakeholders, and you have to show them what your company is like. They want to be part of that culture. And that's why ESG is becoming part of your strategy. It's not just something that you have to do as well, part of corporate governance, not anymore. It has become part of your service, part of your DNA. And in order to make sure that the people understand what you are doing, you have to disclose it. Not only in the annual report, it's a continuous disclosure on your website, videos, other statements. You see it everywhere. And later this morning or this afternoon for you guys, I will explain and show what our company is doing in this area. Every day, seriously, every day there is an announcement related to ESG. And why do we do this? Because we want to create an ecosystem around our company. And that ecosystem is about ESG. And we have to have a dialogue with the stakeholders. So you cannot escape it. It's not just part of an annual report that you start like after the new year in February. We all get nervous about the annual reports again. That was the past. Today, it's about continuous ESG disclosure. And I also see a question. If you want, I can, because there's a question to me.
Yes, Eric, there's a
yeah.
couple of questions if you can
A couple of
address them.
questions. Oh, I see. Okay, do you want me to do them or?
Yes, please,
Yeah.
before we move.
Okay, the question
Yes.
is, people, if you open your chat box, you can see the question, but I will read it as well. Do you have people commenting that ESG as a strategy only works in jurisdictions where investors focusing on responsible investment and consumers who are more woke but less so in emerging jurisdictions? And if so, what's your response? No, my response is the opposite. In emerging jurisdictions, this is much more important. And because the urgency is clearer. So give you an example from Africa. We were in Rwanda, and I think consumer behavior really changed there. And that's why banks have huge problems. The telecom companies took over the banks. And the reason is that the telecom companies had a better relationship with their consumers, with their stakeholders, understood better what the stakeholders actually want. And that's why they could move so much faster, creating an ecosystem, leaving the banks behind. So this is even more important in emerging jurisdictions, as was mentioned here, than in more, let's say, developed jurisdictions. So there are many, many examples from Africa, Southeast Asia. Look at Gojek, for instance, and Grab, and how fast they move in many industries, not only in ride sharing, but also in finance. And the reason is they have a better relationship, a better dialogue, a better ecosystem, and the consumers, particularly the younger consumers, feel more attracted to this. And if you look at the way they report, they use the Sustainable Development Goals as their compass, and they do this really in a smart way. So no, this is global. Not only in developing jurisdictions. And another thing that we do right now, if you look at, because I work at Signify, we have a lot of projects in emerging jurisdictions, all related to ESG, solar power, clean energy, and that's what resonates. And of course, other organizations like the United Nations, they also support this a lot. So there's a lot of money available. Governments start to support it. So no, this is really global. Don't make the mistake that you think that's more like for the developed countries and we are still behind. I think what my slide shows is this acceleration, and that also creates leapfrogging. So many emerging jurisdictions can actually leapfrog. You don't have to go through all the things and transitions that we did over the last 10 years. You can immediately start because everybody has a thing like this, and we all connected wherever we are. So for you, use this leapfrogging. If you are a company or you advise companies, use this as an example, because this will give you a competitive advantage. ESG is about competition these days.
Thank you, Eric. I can share also from our experience that in many cases, emerging markets are leading into these issues. For example, we worked in Timor-Leste, helping a microfinance institution develop their first ever annual report. And it was much easier for them to start on a journey where they're integrating the financial and sustainability impacts from the get-go than we are having with a much bigger and more sophisticated clients, where you have to go back and into all the policies and practices and restructure them to have and look into the what we call double materiality impact. And I have worked on over 30 codes and lots of scorecards and ESG reporting guidelines. And I must say, and Bistra will share in the next panel, because she sits in the EU, some of the EU commissions on ESG issues, that often emerging markets are more advanced in this area. And currently the IFRS Foundation just sent a consultation paper on sustainability reporting, asking if there should be a global set of global standard for sustainability reporting with IFRS Foundation and its heart. And actually today we are having a webinar across the World Bank Group on that, and there is a overwhelming support from different institutions that there is a need for such a standard. So I see there is so with that, Bistra, we want to move to you to share your views on the business case of disclosure and transparency.
Okay, so do you hear me now, Ralita?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a little bit cold here in Sofia. So you want me to make comments on the toolkit or on the other case about disclosure and transparency? Would you repeat the question, please?
The question is, why is transparency and disclosure of ESG issues important in times of crisis when everyone is focused on financial survival?
Good question, Raleigh, because I think that although we are talking about the crisis, and this early morning I read again some pessimistic forecasts for Bulgaria, but I think that it is the proper time to think about how we can improve our work on sustainability on one side and on good financial performance. And to a certain degree, this means that we try to see the new perspectives of our development. You see, provided we try to refer to the example in our part of the world, in Europe, the future development and is, as I say, is associated with sustainability. We would not like only to profit from pollution. We are not trying to make profits from industries who are increasing CO2, but we are trying to transform our industries. So provided it's possible, provided to have resources. So that's why it's very important when you are planning these new developments for, let's say, CO2 neutral economies, it's very important to disclose information to should-be investors. How do you plan to develop these new activities, sustainable activities in your company, in your portfolio? From this perspective, for me, it is very important to present clear picture in your report about environmental, social, and governance issues. The investors, they are, as I say, they would try to see not stranded assets, but they would like to see prospective companies. That's why at present, I like very much the presentation of Eric. It is not only about the digitalization, it is not only about good financial performance, but it was also about putting all these factors, digitalization, ESG, and financial issues in one basket in order to attract investors. I'm not quite sure, did I deliver the message you'd like to have, Raleigh? But for me, although we have now COVID, we have to think about, again, ESG. And it is, I read your article about COVID and ESG, and I think that you're correct that our work now within our social issues, it is, and disclosing this to the investors, it is again a good opportunity to attract investors and investors to know that we are complying with ESG also irrespective of this crisis. Am I clear, Raleigh?
Yes, Bistra, thank you. Thank you very much. And I was talking to some big companies in US recently to one of the trainings we are doing, and they said in their proxy votings, the two most asked questions for this year are about climate change and employees' treatment. And because we're talking about the investors and investing in emerging markets, so Anne, I know you have a comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Riley. Look, what I would like to say is we live in a global world. There is absolutely no way of escaping it, whether you're in a developed market or an emerging market. I'll give you the example, Rana Plaza. Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, the building fell down and sadly, many people were killed. The global clothing manufacturers who were getting their clothes manufactured in those buildings were not the renters of the building or the owners of the building, but the locals who were the suppliers to those companies were the renters. And it has led to considerable building construction rules and regulations and changes in Bangladesh. ESG is on everybody's agenda. You can just look at the issues that you have with the fires in the Amazon basin and the contributions that they're making to CO2 emissions, but also to the destruction of the heritage of the Amazon basin. I think you cannot divorce emerging markets because of supply chains, long supply chains from developed markets to emerging markets. You cannot divorce those two things. If, for example, you look in Brazil, BHP, the biggest mining company in the world, had a mine there in conjunction with Vale of Brazil. So it's a local mining company and a global mining company. And the local mining company did not sufficiently monitor the strength of their tailings dam, which has toxic water in it. The dam wall burst and the entire valley to the sea was destroyed in terms of agricultural land and fisheries out in the sea where that toxic water went. BHP had to pay restitution, Brazil had to pay restitution, and in the meantime, the agricultural, the farmers and the fishermen were all out of work. So you can see we don't live in a nice, neatly boxed world anymore, and ESG is most important from all of those jurisdictions.
Thank you, Anne, and I would like to thank the panel for their short and succinct contribution, and as well the participants for asking questions and making this an engaging and motivating sessions. And as you have seen, for some of the panelists, we use one slide just to keep you focused. For some, no slides. So these are techniques that you can consider for your audience. Mary Jo, back to you.
Eric,
Relisa, can I
Yes,
quickly
Eric,
say
go
something?
ahead.
Because
Yes.
there's one question was being asked in the chat, which I think is extremely important. And I think Anne can also say something about it. What's the difference between CSR and ESG? And I get that question a lot. I will give you my perspective, and then Anne can add if she wants to do something, add something as well. So CSR is corporate social responsibility. That's what companies do just to give back to society. This is like, you know, we, for instance, we have an oil company, and they also give some money to a charity. That to me is CSR, and they report on their CSR as well. Some jurisdictions require large companies to spend some of their profits or revenue on CSR. And then okay, so Vicky doesn't agree, but let me then explain what ESG is. So ESG to me, that's part of the strategy of the company. That becomes part of the ecosystem, part of the DNA, and that to me now is actually even more important, because that's how consumers and other stakeholders make investment decisions or other decisions. So that to me are the differences, and I see that other people have similar ideas, but I must say that CSR and ESG, they are meeting each other more and more, obviously, and you cannot really distinguish them anymore like we could in the past. That's just my perspective. And Vicky, I also want to hear your perspective, obviously.
Yeah. So the way we approach this from MCRB is we try and avoid using the word CSR because of all these different multiple understandings. But where we do meet people who want to use it, we try to get them to look at it as the broad spectrum, from everything from compliance and respecting human rights through to the philanthropy, and look at the whole thing. But we say to them, yeah, number one most important thing is you need to obey the law and do no harm. And that's what being responsible, that's what social responsibility is. Then beyond that, look at what your business can do to address societal environmental challenges, like employing more local people, being more resource efficient, et cetera, and additionally, of course, if you wish to be philanthropic in responding to COVID response, floods, you know, sponsoring local cultural events, that's great too, but make sure that that in itself is responsible, that it is not a driver for corruption or other aspects. So yeah, if you just come back and say, well, CSR is about charity, that will confuse the Myanmar audience who we're trying to get, including the government audience who we're trying to get more educated on this. So I would be happy with Nikola to do a session on this for our trainers, and we've written it all out in the Winchester report, which is coming out on Monday, because what we're seeing at the moment is some really unhelpful behaviour by government on this, which needs to be directed in a more business integrity focused way. Thank you.
So then I think our views are not that different, actually. So I think I agree. But what I try to do is where people came from in the past, but that as exactly what you said, it's all about the behavior. And that's also where, to me, ESG and CSR are meeting, and you cannot really distinguish between these things anymore.
Yeah, and we say sustainability, ESG, same thing, really. And exactly. CSR in the round, same thing, yeah.
Yeah. I thought this was an important question, so that's why I thought we had to spend some time on it.
This is a very important question, and I can share a slide with you because also in Europe and Central Asia region, this is a very important question because we did start it with like 15 years ago with working groups on corporate social responsibility and defining it. And now the EU Commission, when I was looking how to make the distinction, has a useful definition of CSR, and it defines it as the responsibility of enterprise for their impact on society, and therefore it should be company-led, and it's an ethical concept. Companies can become socially responsible by integrating social, environmental, ethical, consumer, and human rights concerns into their businesses. So this is something
that's a definition from 2011, which again is that broader picture. What we find when we do our training is that Myanmar audiences seem to split about 50-50 into, some of them see it as the wider definition, some of them see it as the charity. The problem is that the government, almost 90% of them see it as the charity approach.
Ralitza,
yes.
Ralitza,
Yes,
would you mind if I just add a few words to the comments here?
Yes, go ahead.
About CSR and ESG. I wouldn't like to go to the theory, but I would like to point out that yes, there are a lot of definitions, but currently, of course, to a certain degree, there is a kind of overlapping. I did research on this, but ESG gives you broader picture on very topical issues. Let me give an example in terms of governance. One of the key issues is the disclosures of annual incomes of the board members, CEOs, financial CEO, etc. Corporate social responsibility does not disclose these issues. And currently, I'm talking currently year 2020, it is one of the musts the company in European Union have to disclose the salaries, the incomes, annual incomes. And it is very important because during the crisis in year 2007 and later on, what was found out, not in Bulgaria, but in developed economies, a big discrepancy between the incomes of the high level people at the top of the company and the people that worked on the floor. So for me, that's similar, but ESG gives you more detailed picture on issues like environment, and here unmentioned this morning, climate change and climate risks. CSR does not disclose information about climate change, about CO. And as I mentioned at the end, governance. And finally, and I'm again going back to Anne, for instance, ESG has to give picture how you are working with your suppliers. Do you comply with the UN business and human rights principles? Do you respect the people on the various level on the supply chain? And it is very important. So to make the story short, I respect all views about that CSR and ESG are one and the same thing, but from the perspective of year 2020 and UN goals 2030, ESG is a relevant system of indicators about how does company comply with these topical issues. Of course, it is about, again, responsibility. And be advised that now in Europe, there is another trend, not corporate social responsibility, but corporate sustainable responsibility. You see this slide chain. So did I answer in a proper way, or I make more difficult for the people, for the for the people and for the panel to make this distinction between CSR and ESG.
Could I do a quick screen share? Sorry, just since we, because it's really important, this issue, and we've thought about it a lot. So this is what we presented yesterday to the Human Rights Commission, and we present it more generally, and it's trying to describe it in terms, including in Myanmar language terms, that we think are understood here. So it's probably saying what you're saying, Bistra, and what you're saying, Eric, and so on. But it's a pictorial form, and as I say, we'd be happy to have further discussions with our training section on this, and also to talk about the pitfalls within the Myanmar context, which are coming up again, which we have studied in depth, so we know where all the compulsory 2% elements are embedded in legislation and contracts and so on. Sorry to jump in on this, but I am passionate about the mess which is being created currently.
Vicky, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to be of help. But as I mentioned, it is very important to see this system of requirements you have to command and to communicate to the people, and especially supply chain, and UN guidelines about business and human rights. Sorry, but I'm glad that we are on one and the same page.
Thank you. And in the meantime, I shared as well also some ways we present this to make it clearer to different audiences, because this is a universally confusing issue for everyone. And sorry, Mary Jo, for taking some of your time, but I think that was a good exchange and an important topic for everyone, because there's so many opinions.
Actually, that was an excellent interaction. The question that we're addressing is, how do you engage senior leaders and other professionals, especially when we're dealing with a screen? So what I would like to highlight first is how much I appreciated the fact that Vicky jumped in. That was fantastic, because what you're demonstrating is something that you can do more easily because you are established locally. And any of you that are trainers or facilitators, anyone who pulls together a webinar could very easily put up a key question and come up with a panel and engage people in a discussion. It could be bilingual, but you can move much more deeply into these topics than, say, we can from an international sphere. So this panel discussion is a very good example of how to engage, especially when we're doing online work. I just want to point out the importance of the question. I mean, right now it's finding the importance of the question and also being able to adapt to, wait a minute, what does that term mean? Because the way we define things, I understand the point that you're making, and that is, how are we framing this? Because obviously you are having an impact not just on the business community, but in governance as well, and governments. So I respect exactly why it was such a vital point. With the other observation that I have is, what I love is the fact that this has not felt like a mechanical death by PowerPoint experience, which is what so many of us deal with training online. This is really an opportunity to interact. So thank you very much, panel members, Raleigh for moderating, and Anne and Eric and Bistra for fully engaging. And so what I'd like to do now is just recognizing time and respecting time. I'm going to acknowledge that we are going to be 20 to 30 minutes late. So I hope the substantive discussions make it possible for you to stay with us. I will, you can see on the side, the slides that I will skip, but I want to go back to this piece and then go to what works. So basically, please keep in mind, it's easy for you to remember. This is the experiential adult learning is a continuous learning cycle. It doesn't stop. I love the fact that continuous adult learning is now a norm. I mean, no one thinks, okay, you finished high school or you finished college, you have your advanced degrees, okay, you're finished. It's not possible. So anyone in a leadership role and anyone who's planning to become an educator, facilitator, has to be curious, and you have to love the fact, you have to love your topic. And so you have to be stimulated by opportunities to learn from the participants. Ultimately, the participants will probably learn more from each other than they do from you. And I expect that to be my experience today. So if you write down on a piece of paper so that you don't forget the 4 phases, they're not separate, they're overlapping, that relate to experiential learning. It's motivate, inform, and you can see the key questions, strategize, and then apply. And typically apply takes place outside of any learning event. The strategize piece is something that some of you have experienced with us when we've had fish bowls and we've had role plays. And I leave this to your imagination there because with your IOD, you may be able to set up some of these are scenarios. They are problem posing experiences. People may go into role plays and you can really enjoy the experience because you have the diverse backgrounds there. You probably have company secretaries and the individuals that would be involved in disclosure and transparency. But I'd like to ask Bistra, well, I'm sorry, Bistra, if you don't mind, I'll move on to the next slide and just ask Anne. I'd like to talk a little bit about what works. And I just finished sharing my observations about what I saw with the panel discussion and how much I appreciated someone who obviously is well-informed and passionate about this work. I also noticed that there was a desire to question, and that is very common with adult learning. It's almost impossible to go through an event without someone questioning what you're saying. And so without going into detail, I just want to emphasize for anyone who's facilitating, you have to love the questions. That's all. Don't be defensive. Just think carefully, what's happening, what's the concern, and how can I help to address that? But for now, without going into more of the emotional intelligence, I'd like to take my time to take advantage of the expertise of the panel and first begin with Anne and ask, Anne, I've worked with you for many years. I have never heard the same presentation from you twice. And I notice from my work with you, you do a lot of preparation before every single event. I mean, and that's because you love your work and you like to relate. So could you talk a little bit about your preparation for this type of program?
Well, thank you for that, Mary Jo. Look, for me, I newly prepare, even if it's the same topic, I will newly prepare every single time. And the reason I will is because I respect the people and the time who are giving their time to be participants in the event. Your time is valuable. And I think I've got to be very sure I'm presenting to you what it is I at least think you need. I usually do a lot of homework on the geography, the particular issues that you've got, but also I think every agenda is different. It's either a different time or a different sequence of topics, a change of emphasis. For example, our agenda today, in my topic, I'm going to really just heavily focus on COVID-19 because you all came to the session on December 2. And so there's no point in just repeating things. And it doesn't create an ambiance between the two of us. And I actually think there is a lot to be said for trying to make relationships. I try to go through the participants list and to see if there's a person there I've taught before or presented to or facilitated with or worked with, because it starts that opening of a conversation. And I think finally in my preparations, when I do the preparation, I try to access the very latest, most up-to-date current information. And I also try to put in very pragmatic examples because We can talk theoretically as much as we like, but it's the pragmatic examples that you can take away and move forward with and say, well, this is what this company's doing. Now, they're in a big developed economy, but in actual fact, these are the kinds of things they're thinking about, and maybe we could learn from that. So a lot of, I do a lot of new material preparation, and you'll see it in the set of slides I've got for this session.
Thank you, Anne, for being very explicit about what you do. That's something that whether you're an analyst or you're someone, some of you are much more dynamic in the way, because you're charismatic, you're great speakers, you're entertaining. We have been suffering from that type of leadership here for 4 years. And basically the doing your homework and being prepared and making sure that you understand the background is something I just don't take for granted. So I definitely wanted to thank you for the work that you do. And it's a pleasure to actually learn from you every single time. So Eric, you bring this energy and preparation, but also you are someone who is now guiding us in terms of dragging us into this online learning experience. So could you talk to us a little bit about some of the things you've learned about online learning? Because I think all of us will be relying on online learning, I think, into the future, even beyond this crisis with the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's a journey. I think that's the most important message. But what I learned is that it's not just doing an in-class session online. That just doesn't work. So you have to change the way you present, but you also have to change the way you do the discussions. And I think what we just had was a very good example of it. So yeah, you have more opportunities and possibilities to engage with the participants, because the participants, normally what you have in a classroom, there are a couple of participants who are really active, and you have some who are more passive. But now people can engage by just raising their hands, or just start talking, or they use the chat to discuss with you, and they do this while you are presenting, and I kind of like that, because you can immediately then address certain questions, and I think what you should do when you do online sessions is exactly what we did. You look at the questions and you have a discussion with them, and you see how what happened with CSR. And then you also hear immediately how people come from different perspectives. So you have the legal compliance perspective, and you have more like the strategy perspective. And during the discussion, you see that basically we say the same thing, but that's where people learn. So you have to make it very active. Agendas, which is interesting, should not be too full, because you need to have some flexibility. But it all starts with like a presentation in a way which is more than just transferring and sending information to the crowd. It's more to be provocative and try to get a discussion. So what I normally do, if I'm forced to do a longer Zoom session, you come up with like a 50 minutes presentation, very powerful, very clear, and then you stop and you open the floor, and there will always be questions, particularly in the chat, and then you have a longer discussion on them. So for instance, today, and this is a train the trainer session, but if this was a normal session, I think we should have had a longer discussion on CSR ESG with more examples from other jurisdictions or people in the room, and that's how it really works. And then it becomes engaging. And that's what I see with my students. If you do like a normal information sharing session, so I'm here talking to you, people are multitasking all the time, right? You are at home, you sit in front of your computer, you get an email, and boom, there you go. And now I think you can have more and better discussions by having shorter statement presentations, and then open the floor, and then you see what people are interested in. So now, for instance, Krista said more examples from Myanmar perspective. Yeah, that's what you would do, because this is a trainer of the trainer session. But if this was a ESG or CSR session, then you would have had more examples from Myanmar, because the participants are in the room as well, and they can share. And as soon as people start sharing, my experience is, they are not that afraid anymore. Like in a classroom, it's more difficult to talk. Here you can just boom, you send it, and bum, it's gone. And you can have a much better discussion. So on the one hand, it's an in-class session is good, and in some perspectives better, but online you can have excellent discussions as well. So for instance, now Krista, she says more examples from Myanmar. If this was a real training session, I would then ask her, can you please explain? Then she could do this in the chat, or she starts talking. And what my experience is with adults and students, you get fantastic discussions. And then you, lecturer, become more like a moderator, a facilitator.
Well, it's interesting. Actually, there is a full discussion taking place on the chat. So this is an example of what you were saying before about reporting. It's not just an annual report. I mean, there's continuous communication because of social media. So actually companies really need to monitor this. And in the same way, facilitators need to monitor this. You're absolutely right in that in the time that we have, we want to be responsive to the questions, but what I also see is through the IOD, there are burning issues that have surfaced on the chat that I think the Institute will be able to respond to with some very challenging and essential sessions themselves. So
Eric, and just a quick question, because I know that you're doing trainings to companies themselves and to the employees, and I believe some of the IOD trainers will do that. So maybe you can share a couple of tips from that, because that's a different audience.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's actually the, yeah, there are several ways. If they ask me to do a real session, I will give them some videos in advance, like short videos on certain topics, like 5 to 10 minutes vlog type videos, more like informal. And then because these people will watch them, if you give them materials to read, somehow people are always too busy to read. But if you give them some videos, they will watch them at a point while they're eating or while they have lunch. And so they are prepared, and then you can open, you just summarize what was on the videos, and then you have a fantastic discussion. One thing you should do, by the way, as soon as you see a discussion emerging in the chat, you have to bring it in the classroom, in the virtual classroom. If you don't do that, you run the risk that the discussion in the chat is much more interesting than what you have to say. So you have to bring that in. So as a lecturer, you have to be extremely flexible. But also your slides, it's much more important. Okay. I never really liked bullet point slides, but in an online environment, they are really killing. These are the things that people immediately switch off and start doing other things. So you have to have examples like Anne has, lots of them. You have to bring stories and anecdotes there from all jurisdictions. And if I had to, for instance, give a presentation in Myanmar, I would give examples from other, let's say, emerging economies. I would be careful with examples from Myanmar because I'm not the specialist, but people in the room will bring them in, and then we have fascinating discussions as well. So to be honest, I kind of like the online environment. It gives you lots of opportunities, but also like the in-class. So in that respect, I think the future will be kind of blended learning, where we have a mix of in-class lectures and presentations, but definitely also the online ones, because yeah, we can learn so much from each other.
So something that I would like to say, thank you very much, Eric. That is helpful. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you don't show the videos when you're doing the online training. You send them in advance.
Yeah, no, sharing, okay, yeah. Sharing, some people have in their presentations videos, and that can work, but then everybody has to have a fast internet connection. And when you do them internationally, not everybody has that. Also, certain people will use their phone to connect to you. And if you start sharing videos, that's not going to work either. So videos I try to send in advance as just materials to prepare for the class. But the videos are not long. I just, for instance, the CSR ESG, because it's so fascinating. I would have one video on CSR, one video on ESG, and one video on how the two kind of get together. That's how I would do it. Fast, quick, and not everybody has to agree, which is good, because then you get the discussion and that's where you learn.
Thank you. I'd like to just make one comment before we move to Anne's session. Vicky, did you want to, is everyone okay if we move on, or is there something burning? I can actually see Vicky. Hello? All right.
My burning is I'm going to leave you shortly because I have to moderate something, and so I'm just sorting out my slide pack. Sorry about that. I should turn my camera off.
Okay, no, thank you. And thank you for engaging the way you did. I just wanted to mention, be really cautious about the examples you give and the respect you give to the companies that you refer to. So one of them, even though something may be true, I just want to caution everyone about case examples and criticism. I'm sure you already know this, but
I mean, I think we would welcome also case studies if you've got some from the region, because this has been something that as MIOD and as the learning committee we discussed. We clearly need some. We clearly need them to resonate. But as you say, writing them about Myanmar companies is a bit too close to the bone. So we're in the market for suggestions that will be maybe from Thailand or elsewhere.
Vicky, you may like to look a little bit across border to India. India introduced its CSR legislation, which it sounds as though you have
not
followed.
on CSR, no. I mean more generally. Sorry.
Oh right, okay,
right.
right.
I mean, I know the Indian one is what poisoned our own problems.
Yes.
On CSR, but I'm talking more generally about the about case studies and so on in the book.
So Vicky, we are preparing an online platform where we are not just going to have the toolkit in a shorter, more streamlined version, but also pages for different regions where we're going to collect and present studies. So we're going to prepare one for the EAP region and collecting case studies and presenting across the region on the topic is a big goal for us.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let me just move forward. Anne, we'll go to your presentation, please.
Yes, I'm going there right now, Mary Jo. I'm hoping to share my screen. I thought I had it open. It was open. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, then. I'm just going to go very quickly. We are talking about changes in reporting, and changes in reporting can come by regulators saying they want more information or they want different information. And we have been moving more. And I need to declare my hand here. I am a member of the IIRC Council, the Integrated Reporting Council, and we are very focused on more reporting on strategy, more reporting on business model, and on ESG activities generally. So change in reporting has been happening for something like about 25, 30 years now. But I want to actually focus in my session right now a little bit on the biggest change, this year's change, COVID-19 and reporting on COVID-19. But before I do, I'd like to ask you all, please get onto the chat, because I'd like to see what it is that you are going to tell me regarding your issues. What company issues have you had with COVID-19? I can't actually see the chat. Why is that? I can see participants. I can see new share, pause share, annotate, but I can't see. There's the chat. Now, what experiences have you had from COVID-19? What do your companies or have your companies needed to explain to the world at large, the market in Myanmar, about COVID-19 and your activities? So who's going to start with chatting to me about this? Have you had experiences regarding COVID-19 in terms of the company? What company strategies had to change? What company risks changed? What did companies have to do to accommodate and manage the health and safety of employees, etc.? Okay, I'm not seeing too much. Here we go. Okay. I don't see any response just yet. So I'll get started with my presentation. And perhaps major risk, complying with unclear regulations from your OHS, that's your security market, is it? Nikola, what else is there? Meeting deadlines set by regulators, that's critical. I'm going to give you some global examples about what happened to manage some of these things. Anything else that needed to either showed up shortcomings or else showed up activities that companies had to undertake because of COVID-19? Well, we'll start with this and we'll see exactly where this is going, and I'll keep an eye. Ministry Health changes in working practices, yes. Working from home with limited facility of IT, well, that's a challenge, that's for sure. Ministry of Health and Sport and the regulators, yes, they were making changes. I'm going to just get into what I think we all need to know about COVID-19. Anybody, any stakeholder in a company, any investor, but certainly stakeholders, employees and regulators, even company managements, all need to know that the company has a long-term future. And this is actually not so easy in these current times because we're very uncertain. We're uncertain now because we've got COVID-19, but we don't know how much is going to escalate like it has in the United States, or how it's going to de-escalate like it has in Taiwan and Australia. It's very unpredictable. And so we need to still see that the company has a long-term future. If you're an employee, you want a long-term job. We want to see that the company is well organized and run so that your company leaders are alert to knowing what's happening and making change, are decisive. It's a difficult time to be decisive. But at the same time, the company remains under control. It will continue growing, is financially viable. So we need, all of us, all stakeholders need to be able to trust the company, suppliers, customers, employees, shareholders, regulators, banks, everybody. So we need to know these things as a generality. And even though we're talking about COVID-19, we still, the general principle for disclosure and transparency doesn't change. We want continuous reporting, very timely reporting, at any time of the day or night, that's where websites become useful, of all material matters that may affect the investment decision or company operations, because your suppliers, your customers, your banks, your regulators, and your employees are going to be very interested in the company operations. It's not just about investors, but notice what I'm saying. We want all material matters. Now, in COVID-19, this is going to be very, very different from company to company. An airline company, I'll give you the example of Singapore Airlines, isn't the same as, say, a telephone company, because people are still using their telephones, but their employees are working from home. So they will have COVID issues that need to be disclosed, but in actual fact, they're not of the same nature or magnitude as, say, for example, Singapore Airlines. But you need constant communications, not only with shareholders, but also with stakeholders all the time, much more regular communications. And so it still comes back to this old adage, not more reporting, but better reporting. Tell us now how it is. Tell us what your challenges are, be honest. And it's not just about financial reporting. It is about you've had to send your employees home. Now you've got an IT problem. So you can see it's about what is affecting your business. Now, if you go through, I'm not going to deal with this because this was a lead in for something else, and I didn't remove it because I wanted to show you that I'm not speaking to these now because that's about corporate governance and it's not appropriate to this particular session. I left them there so as I could comment that I'm not dealing with corporate governance. I'm dealing with reporting on COVID-19. And I've asked you that question already about, I'm just going back, if I can go back, I'm going back as to what was the impact of COVID-19 on your company activities. And you came back to me with issues about the regulator, not necessarily changing reporting deadlines and so forth. And I want to get into a little bit of that because that is where the difficulty is. But I'd like to talk to you a little bit now about what is corporate governance reporting, what's occurring. This is a survey that was taken by the Boston Consulting Group in May of this year, on May 17 of this year. And they said, above all, we need all companies, wherever they are, whatever their magnitude, to be transparent, honest. Tell us how it is. Don't hide it, because only you know the issues you're facing. We need to increase the frequency of engagement and communications, provide many more additional disclosures, new metrics. If you've got old KPIs you're reporting to, what are the new ones that have been introduced, because you really can't run with the old ones because your strategy is very different under COVID-19. We do want some focus on liquidity and cash flow to keep the company safe, to know that you're going to be in business in the future, and focus on your long-term strategy. Can you still stick to it? Do you need to adjust it? If so, what have you done? How have you adjusted? So these are the most important issues that that all those who were interviewed, and there were companies and investors and employees, were interested in. Now, I could go through this list, and Eric's right. This is a list. I'm not going to talk to this list. This is a list of issues that boards of directors are facing in COVID-19. And this is the list of issues that you need to report on in COVID-19 reporting. But rather, I'll tell you the story. I myself was vice chairwoman of the global investor community, and all this is public information, so it's nothing new here. But we had to immediately introduce in February of this year a COVID crisis committee, and it comprised of the chairman, the vice chairman, the CEO, and the head of our audit and finance committee. We had to regularly meet once a week to support the CEO through the fast decisions they were having to make. And believe me, we were all a little bit nervous about making those decisions, because we were making those decisions in the absence of full and complete information. But 70% of our revenue was wiped out by COVID-19. We earn 70% of our revenue from conferences, face-to-face conferences. So we had to shift our strategy from face-to-face to webinars, to development of the technology so that we can reach up our membership, so that we can improve our revenue. And so we had to change a lot of our working conditions, not only our strategies, but our working conditions. As a consequence of having to move to many more webinars, we had to spend a lot we didn't expect to spend on IT, getting the very latest on conference technology and so forth. We sent our workers all home. The consequence of that is they're all very comfortable working from home, and we found we didn't need an office. We have done a deal with Regis for our offices, and we don't need a central office in central London anymore. So you learn a lot of things on the way through. But what did we have to report? Well, we had to come up with our annual general meeting. Our annual general meeting had to be held, and it wasn't in our articles of association. And this is where the regulators come in, and the regulators said you can hold, under COVID-19, a fully internet enabled annual general meeting. But you had to do it by September the 30th. So we had to have our annual general meeting on September 23rd, so that we met the regulators. But in between, we had a lot more communications. We used to have a monthly newsletter to our members. Then we had something like, it was about every 10 days we went out to our members with what we were doing, the decisions we were making, the new products and services that we were offering. And they got right behind us. It was fantastic. We were very, very happy with that. But what it did do is we as a board had to be very careful that we did not start making management decisions, but that we supported management in their decisions and so forth. We had to really be we had reserves, but we had to make sure our cash flows matched and complied with our reserves. And we had actually had a debate about 2 years ago about the level of reserves. And me being a chartered accountant said I wanted to raise the level of reserves. And there was a bit of pushback. Well, everyone's very now glad that we've got the level of reserves that we did have. But all along, we had to build company resilience. We had to ensure that those employees who were so important to us felt safe, felt comfortable, had comfortable working conditions at home, but equally that they still felt part of an organisation. I talked about the increased efforts we had to make on digitisation, but this is a kind of list. This is what we want to know. But now I'm going to get into some practical examples. This is Nedbank in South Africa. In January, on the left-hand side, you'll see here on the left-hand side, these were their risks as they were completing their annual report. That's January. Those in the yellow box on the right are February, 1 month later. And you'll see there what wasn't in the January list: people and operational risk, liquidity risk, capital risk. So it tells me something. The reporting tells me something. I'm an employee. They're very focused on their people. They're focused on keeping the company going, keeping the bank going. They're very focused on our financial position, liquidity and capital. Of course, you're a bank, and any company has to be in this environment focused on their financial position. But it's not just about financial. Look how high up people and operational risk came. So you can see, and that's from 1 month to the next. Now it tells me the board's alert, the board's watching their risk, and they're changing their risk for change conditions. So I'm happy with that, actually. Some regulators, and I use this as an example because you're pointing to me that your regulators might not have addressed some of these issues. Some regulators have come out with a set of samples of what is good COVID disclosure. And here we are on ESG disclosure. Disclosure by a company. Airtel Africa is a telecommunications company in East Africa and Western Central Africa, and disclosure of the support they provided to their customers. And this is in their annual report, which came out, I think it was October 2020. But it shows you the non-financial support as well as the free services that they provided to their customers. There's a couple of other examples I could highlight: a better disclosure, the non-financial support to suppliers. Here's another one. This is a low-cost operation airline. The disclosure, operational changes made in the short term, the number of employees reduced by 19%. You've got to tell the good, the bad, the ugly in COVID. The disclosure explains how the company expects to take advantage of future opportunities. This gives us, as employees, as suppliers to this company, as investors in this company, hope for the future. They've got a picture of where they're going. So it's actually very handy disclosure. But finally, I just really want to focus a little bit on what is in your region. And this is what I mean. Singapore Airlines was one of the very first to report in its annual report to June 2020 on COVID. And it had a separate excerpt, 4 pages separately on COVID-19, but it also had a lot of other information throughout the annual report, and it's worth having a look at. And here are some of the words that I can read to you. COVID-19 pandemic has had an unprecedented impact on the aviation industry, and particularly on Singapore Airlines, because we have an absence of a domestic market to fall back on. And going further down, they've implemented cuts to flight frequencies to most parts of its global network. 96% of the scheduled passenger capacity has been ended by the end of April. A large part of the fleet was also grounded. Their planes are out in the back of Alice Springs here in Australia. They had to negotiate adjustments to their delivery stream for existing aircraft and their payments on existing aircraft and their payments for future ordered aircraft. And so it goes on. It's worth reading that annual report excerpt. What I could say is COVID-19 reporting requires a lot of honesty, a lot of judgment, and certainly a lot of focus on the financial impact, the dividend impact, the cash flow impact, but also the impact on company operations. But certainly don't forget the future. Give us hope that you're going to be able to get back into act and tell us what your plans are for getting your operations on the road again. But I think I'm going to leave the discussion there. Just one final word. For me, and I read a lot of annual reports, my perception of the quality of a company's reporting impacts my perception of the quality of its management. If you give me a good report with a lot of information, good and bad, I will respond because actually I know I can trust you. And it comes back to what Bistra said earlier. It's trust. That's what transparency, accountability, and disclosure is all about. Now, I'm hoping I can see, are there any questions or comments? I'd like to see the comments coming. Where do I see my comments on the chat? Ah, here we are. Where are we? Okay, then. Vicky's talking about moderator discussion on landlord. That's from the other thing. And she's gone. Now I'm going to see, does anyone have any questions for me on COVID-19 reporting? Mine was supposed to be a topic that I was presenting to you. And just to bring it back to the TOT perspective, I tried to make the slides interesting and practical. I tried to introduce a reading that you can reference later. I tried to introduce also perhaps a case example, but I'll leave it there, Mary Jo, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I greatly appreciate the way you personalize that as well. I mean, drawing on your own experience with companies and as an investor. And now we'll move smartly to the next presentation, which is the company leadership on crisis response. And this is Eric, please.
Okay, yeah, what I'm going to do, I will keep it short, and I'll give you a couple of takeaways. I think that's what I want to focus on. So let me share my my slides. So yeah, there's a quiet transformation of disclosure and transparency going on. And I think the first takeaway is that when you are teaching or having a discussion on ESG or CSR, there are two perspectives. One is the regulatory perspective, and that works. And then you're going to explain to companies, if the companies or people who work at companies are your audience, you can say, well, these are new rules, we have to comply with them, and we are going to tell you how to do it. That's one way. What resonates better, because I also work at a company, if you have two perspectives. One is the regulatory perspective, the other one is more like the strategic perspective, and then you explain to them why this is good for them and how they can do it and how they can actually make this a strategic decision, which can become a competitive advantage. Because I work and deal with many companies, but this is the situation we are in everywhere. So I'm a practitioner from the 90s, and we had long product life cycles, steady industry environments, less need for innovation. We move on to the 2010s, and we all of a sudden see that we see platforms emerging everywhere, in emerging countries, in developing countries, in developed countries as well. Particularly in emerging countries, these platforms are extremely important. Then we have COVID-19, which Anne just discussed, and we see a new reality. Leaders are talking about the new economic reality and how to deal with this. On top of that, we have like environmental discussions, we have health discussions, a lot of discussions about inclusion and diversity, and changing consumer behavior. So this is the world we are living in. And this means that companies, for instance, if you have a home trainer company, you have to move from product thinking to more experience thinking. And I think that's extremely important to realize that it's not only about the product that is changing, but also your organization has to change. You have to become much closer to your stakeholders. And you see that here on the right-hand side. They talk about even a zero distance to consumers. Now, one example that I also used like 2 weeks ago, but I think it's a great example, and also to show how this is not only important in developed economies, but also in emerging ones, is the Tony Chocolonely. So this is a Dutch chocolate company, which is growing extremely fast. And the reason is not that they have better chocolate. The real reason is that they create this ecosystem where they are continuously reporting also on ESG. So 2 weeks ago, I showed you the employment agreement that they have. And this is just to show you how transparent they are. They are not using legal documents in a way that nobody understands. They try to visualize them. But on the right-hand side, you see how they basically report on ESG in a very clear and simple way. And it becomes part of their DNA, part of their ecosystem. But they invest and work a lot with companies in Ghana and Ivory Coast. And there you see that when for Tony Chocolonely, which is a Dutch company, ESG is important. Obviously, for the whole supply chain, ESG becomes extremely important. And now we can all benefit. And I think that's a great example from a company in the Netherlands that is investing a lot in African companies, and by doing that, making it part of the DNA, so everybody, every stakeholder is involved, and investors want to invest in this company, consumers want to buy the chocolate, and also other stakeholders want to be part of this ecosystem. So this is the world we are living in everywhere. And when we talk about corporate governance, it's not only anymore about the corporate governance that you see on the left-hand side, this corporate hierarchical structure. It's much more like a co-creation corporate governance. And in this co-creation corporate governance, training becomes extremely important. We have to create this ecosystem. And that's basically my last slide. So when we give training, it's not only anymore about classroom training or e-learning, because there's a lot of stuff out there that you can just do online. You can get your training and then you can download a certificate. It's also more than just blended learning, that we have a classroom experience and an e-learning experience. What we see happening now is a move to social learning and modern workplace learning. And that's about creating a platform where people can share. It's about informal learning. It's about the chat and the discussions that we had today. That's where the learning really starts. And I think that's also part of the whole transformation that we see in disclosure and transparency, is also transformation that we see in learning. And I think that's what Ralitza is going to introduce now. It's not only about a toolkit anymore that we provide to you with a lot of examples that you can follow. Now we try to set up this ecosystem similar to Tony Chocolonely, but then in the area of disclosure and transparency of ESG. Thank you very much. And now I open the floor for questions, but also hand it over to Ralitza, who's going to explain the ecosystem that we are creating.
Ali?
Yes, I was just waiting if there if there are any questions first. But if not, then I'll take 5 minutes just to explain our own journey on disclosure and transparency. So all of you have received the link to our disclosure and transparency toolkit. And we embarked on that journey about kind of 4 years ago, because disclosure is a big part and very important for us as an investor to know what is happening with the companies. So we started with a simple task just to develop a short guidance for our own clients and companies on how to improve their own disclosure. And at that time, we realized a long time ago that we need to get a full picture of the company's risks and opportunities. We need to look into the DNA of the company, its strategy, governance, and performance. And we need integrated financial and ESG information. And in the markets where we work, there's a lot of confusion among companies, regulators, investors themselves on how to disclose and how to manage the myriad of reporting standards. That's why we streamlined all the current reporting frameworks, and we looked into our own performance standards and corporate governance methodology. So we came up with a model structure of annual report, which focuses on the strategy, the governance, and the performance. And you got the link to our report, which is currently in this stage. It's downloadable. And then under each section, you get, under the 3 pillars, you get examples of how to disclose in each of these subsection, and what information you should look in, and what should be you should pay attention. And the a couple of key things that we introduced at that time and we successfully tested is sort of a progression level and a gradual movement in the markets among the disclosure and the practices. And the second one is that the ESG practices, improving of the disclosure and transparency is actually leading to improving the internal thinking within the company and the dialogue within the company itself among the 3 different pillars. And what we are doing now, because it's we always introduce the toolkit. It's not something to be read cover to cover. It is actually a practical guide, or as in Africa they called it a travel guide, and even a cooking book, where when you need examples and when you need guidance how to disclose particular areas, like what are the most common ESG key performance indicators, or how to do a materiality analysis, or what's the disclosure on the control environment, or the disclosure of board members. You can find examples and guidance and information here. And as Eric said, and working with the entire team now, we are transferring this into an online platform. The online platform is going to have resources, resources for the business case of disclosure and transparency from the perspective of different stakeholders. We are going to have a guidance on what and how to disclose, focusing on the strategy, governance, and performance, and the double materiality, and the information about different sectors and countries. And as I mentioned, here we are going to have sections for the different regions where we'll collect examples and information. We are just doing the one for the ECHA region, where we just collected the disclosure regulation in the different countries, and we'll have examples, case studies, latest news, and events about this. And we'll have information about the regulators and stock exchanges in terms of ESG reporting guidelines, different corporate governance codes and scorecards around the world, and the link to sustainable investing, because you disclosed the information, but there was also a lot of questions raising the concern that this should bring to real investments. Then we're going to have an e-learning course, which can be adapted by trainers. For example, in MIOD, having 6 modules focusing on disclosure and transparency, which can be adapted to your markets. Creation and tool, which will be a reporting tool that will be able to create an outline of an annual report with examples of different examples, and the other practical tool will be a self-assessment of an annual report, a type of a scorecard which will allow to identify and match what is missing in the different reports. So it basically brings together the different elements of reporting. It brings the context, it brings the reporting and the practical tools, and as well the ecosystem, the community of all the trainers, the companies, the regulators, the stock exchanges that we are working on. And we'll appreciate as well like your feedback of what type of information and practical reporting tools you would need and you feel will be useful for the market. So Mary Jo, back to you. I'm cautious of time and the team to make any comments.
Yes, thank you, Raleigh. Actually, I see that there's a question that's really quite relevant to the resources that you are sharing. And that is, it's a question about, this is from Sandra Min, it's in the chat. And she asks, she says, Myanmar companies have been taking baby steps with reporting standards. Now with the pandemic, most companies are not familiar with how to disclose on crisis responses. My question to Anne and Professor Eric is, what is a good framework to start with to respond on crisis? And I saw that you had a reference to the tip sheet.
Yes, if I could respond, Mary Jo, there is a tip sheet that we have at the IFC developed, and it's on their website, www.ifc.org, and you put in COVID-19 tip sheet and you'll get there. But equally too, there are a couple of other very good documents you could use. There is some of the regulators have produced good information. The UK regulator has given a lot of information on how to report and what to do. But can I also, I see this question from Nikola. May I, Mary Jo, address that right now?
Yes, I think
Nikola says to me how to balance the needs between short-term needs, COVID reporting, and longer-term issues. Yes. You actually have to try to incorporate all of that in your reporting. You've got your normal reporting, but you have additional reporting for COVID-19. So I think basically it's a good framework to start with. I would suggest you try to, at each level in your annual report, and I see the next question from Sandra Min. Sandra, when you're looking at your reporting on COVID, most companies not familiar with how to disclose on crisis responses, you need to address it in your financial reporting, in your strategies. You need to consider in your financial reporting any changes in valuations, any changes to assumptions and judgments, but in your non-financial reporting, how it's changed your strategy, how it's changed your risk, and what you're doing about it, how it changes your relationships with employees and IT as well. You need to address all of those. So I'm sorry, I just answered all at once.
No, thank you. Eric, did you want to add any other comment? Oh,
yes. Yeah, I see the baby steps, and I'm just looking at what companies in Rwanda, in Kenya, but also in Indonesia, what they have been doing when they wanted to report, and seriously, they just started with the this is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they just took them and then focused on, okay, which of these goals are really material to us? And then they focused on 2, 3, or 4 of them. And then just wrote down what they were doing in order to improve these issues. And that works as a starting point. This is baby steps, but it really works well. And yeah, also at my company, we did the same thing. We focused on 6 of them, and that's how we report. I can actually, if you look at the annual report, you can see how we did it. We just took them. I think it's good to share. I can do that in a second. Because I have them right
Eric,
here.
can I just also say, you're quite correct. I think take it baby steps, but start simple. That's what you're saying with your SDGs.
Yeah, exactly. I can, let me share what we did in the annual report. And this is just not baby steps, but you then see that it also works for more, let's say, companies that are more than 100 years old. So we took these, this was the, so I'm going to share this with you. So this was like the strategic compass that we had. So we focused on 6 of them. But if you then look at the annual report, you see the 6 back. And then we report on them, what the commitments are in 2020 and the progress in 2019. This is 2019 annual report. So you see a bit of future and what we did last year. But then further, you see the value creation tool. And again, you see here the sustainable development goals and the impact on the 6 that we had. So this is a very simple, relatively simple way to do it. And I looked at a company in Rwanda who was actually doing the same thing, just looking at the sustainable development goals and then pick the ones who were really material and then start reporting on them in a very simple, clear, plain English way, not in all this fancy stuff, but very clear. And that's how you can start. That's also what Gojek in Indonesia did. And yeah, it works. So hopefully this could be a step forward. But then you look at ESG as a strategy, not only as a legal compliance issue, because I see a lot of the comments, and I understand the regulator point of view, but you have to take that into account. I'm a lawyer myself, so compliance is extremely important. However, there's more to ESG, and I think we all have to be aware of it, how it can actually help us and give you a competitive advantage. So here's another example that is shared with, I don't know who shared this, but it's a fantastic example. So I give the
yeah,
floor
this is
to the person who
Kofko.
shared it. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yes, and this is Kofko, and what they did as well is they benchmarked the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also to some of the IFC performance standards, connecting their impact to that.
I think, Raleigh, if they go to the Disclosure and Transparency website, they will see in the documentation there lots and lots of examples to get them started. But my advice is don't make it over complex in the first step.
Correct. That's why I was saying that we have progressive levels as well, so they know how you can move from more common and general practices to good and best international practices. And we have shared the special guidance on COVID and disclosure and transparency, then focusing with practical questions and examples of what to disclose under strategy, governance, and performance as well, including some suggested new KPIs.
Thank you, Raleigh. Actually, one of the benefits of the platform, as you mentioned, is that all of these resources will be easily accessible and transparently accessible to anyone who logs on to the platform that is emerging. So the aim is really to provide many more examples and case studies. But what I hope you picked up as a major theme from this discussion about experiential adult learning is so much of the learning is taking place through the interactions and the dialogue. As much as I appreciate online learning, I hope we never lose the benefit of person-to-person learning as well. But for those of you who will be conducting both types of interactions in Myanmar and possibly in the region, I hope that you are comfortable with your role as a facilitative leader is the way I would describe it. I mean, the main point is all of the answers don't have to come from you, and the more you listen and interact with the expertise of whether it's your co-facilitators or, from what I just heard, the expertise that you have access to through the Institute, what you have there is a very, very deep scope, and not just deep, but wide scope of expertise that's available for any type of presentation. Just focus your questions. That's the main point. Focus your discussions and be flexible in responding to emerging questions. So from my perspective, I think because of time, unless there's someone else that has a burning question, I'd like to thank everyone, Raleigh and all of the presenters. Of course, Bistra for joining us, and Anne and Eric getting up early, or whatever time it is for you. For me, it is 3:15 in the morning. And from the perspective of transparency, for those of you who are participants, I want to share something very interesting with you. When we have a 3-hour event, we have tended to run to 3 hours and 45 minutes. We had a 2-hour event and we kept it under 3 hours. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm racing right now to keep this under 3 hours. So we are puzzling over the time issue, but there you are. So we're sharing the truth and the kind of the mechanics behind the scene as we move forward. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and also thank you very much for your chat comments and the warm welcome from the Institute. So Anar, I don't know if you want to close with any comment, but hello, Anar.
I don't. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, can you? Yeah, very quickly again. I think, yeah, I laughed when you said about yeah, I mean, we tried to make it shorter, but we still took additional 30 minutes. Just somehow, I think it's been very interactive and I hope everyone liked it. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks to all participants. Special thanks to TUI and MID. I hope we can do more activities with you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone from here.
Go to sleep. Mary Jo, please sleep well. Thank you. I think you were the champion with given all the time difference challenges. Thank you. And thank you to everybody else as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, one thing. We'll send you the questionnaires. Please feel them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Have a great day and sleep well.
I know.
Yes. And take care for COVID.
Yeah. Okay. Stay safe, everyone. That is true.
Okay.
Bye now.
See you.